Under the soft clatter of silverware and the lazy hum of conversation, my grandfather lifted his wine glass, looked directly at me, and asked the question that shattered my world. "Claire, sweetheart, why don't you live in the house I bought for you?" His tone was gentle, almost confused, as if the answer should have been obvious. My fork slipped from my hand and hit the plate with a sharp clang. I felt every pair of eyes at the table shift toward me. My parents stiffened. My sister, Melissa, froze, and even her husband's chewing slowed to a halt. My pulse hammered against my ribs. "What house?" I whispered. The room went unnaturally still. I didn't receive any house. Grandpa's smile faltered as he turned toward Melissa. And that was the moment she bolted chair-scraping napkin falling heels clattering across the hardwood, leaving behind a silence so suffocating it felt like the whole family had been caught under a collapsing roof. I didn't remember walking to my car after dinner. One second I was sitting there absorbing the shock of Melissa fleeing like she'd seen a ghost, and the next I was gripping my steering wheel in the driveway of my small rental, still hearing Grandpa's words looping in my head. "Why don't you live in the house I bought for you?" None of it made sense. I had just moved back to Oregon after a year in Seattle, a year spent licking the wounds of a divorce I hadn't seen coming. And in all that time, not once had anyone in my family mentioned a house. Not my parents, not my sister, not Grandpa. No one. I pushed open my front door, tossed my keys onto the counter, and leaned against the wall to breathe. The air smelled faintly of cedar from the candles I'd lit earlier, but even the familiarity of home couldn't settle my nerves. I sank into my couch and replayed the dinner again and again, Grandpa's hopeful smile. Dad's tight jaw, Mom nervously smoothing her napkin, Melissa's terrified, guilty expression. It was that look that kept stabbing at me. It wasn't fear of misunderstanding, it was fear of being exposed. My phone buzzed, a message from Grandpa. "Sweetheart, did your parents not tell you I wired the money last year? I thought you were already settled in." My stomach twisted. Last year when I was in apartments so cramped I could hear my upstairs neighbors sneeze. Last year when I'd worked 2 jobs while paying off my ex's furniture because he'd walked out and left his debts on our joint card. Last year when my family had watched me struggle and never once said a word about help. I typed back with shaking fingers. "What money, Grandpa? What are you talking about?" His reply came instantly, as if he had been waiting all this time for clarity. "I sent $450,000 to your parents. It was for a home in your name. I wanted you to have stability after the divorce. $450,000. The number didn't register at first. It didn't feel real. My parents had never mentioned anything, not in passing, not in hint, not even as a guilt trip. And Melissa, why had she run? There was no world where her reaction made sense, unless she knew exactly what Grandpa was referring to. I pressed the heels of my hands into my eyes, trying to swallow the nausea building in my throat. My parents hadn't raised me to expect inheritance, but they had raised me to believe in trust, honesty, family. Everything suddenly felt like a lie wrapped in a pretty bow. I stood up abruptly, needing air. Outside the night was cold, the kind of Oregon cold that slipped into your bones. I paced the walkway, letting the chill bite at my skin. Questions screamed through my mind. If Grandpa wired the money a year ago, where had it gone? Why didn't I know where was the house? And why out of everyone did Melissa run as if her skin were burning? I walked back inside and grabbed my laptop. I dug through my old emails, searching for anything, any hint that my parents had contacted me about a property, a gift, anything. Nothing. Not even a stray message. My inbox was barren except for work updates from Seattle and a few scattered notes from friends checking in during the worst moments of my divorce, but nothing from my family. My phone buzzed again. This time from my mother. "Can you come by tomorrow? We should talk." I stared at the message. No apology, no explanation, just a gentle nudge, the same tone she used when she wanted to smooth something over without addressing the real issue. For 25 years, that tone had worked on me. It didn't work tonight. I needed answers, and the only person I trusted to give them was Grandpa. The next morning, mist hung low over the Willamette Valley. As I pulled up to Grandpa's house, a sprawling craftsman he'd lived in for more than 40 years. The cedar siding, the wide porch, the wind chimes whispering in the breeze it should have brought comfort. But today, unease swirled in my chest. Grandpa opened the door before I even knocked. His silver hair was neatly combed, but his eyes carried shadows of confusion and disappointment. "Claire," he murmured, pulling me into a hug that smelled like old books and peppermint tea. "Come in, sweetheart." We sat at his kitchen table, the same place where he'd taught me long division, where he'd helped me fill out my first college application. Now he looked like a man questioning everything he thought he knew about his own family. "I need you to explain what happened," I said quietly. He nodded, slid a binder across the table, and opened it to a printed email. "Last February, after your divorce, I asked your parents if they thought purchasing a house in your name would help you restart. They said yes. They said you were overwhelmed and they would handle everything." My chest tightened. "And you wired the money?" "Yes." He flipped to a bank statement. There, in bold letters, was the transfer $450,000, Hartman household for Claire's house purchase. The words blurred as my vision stung. There was no ambiguity, no misunderstanding. Grandpa had given them everything I needed to stand up again after my life had collapsed, and they had— what? Pocketed it. Given it to Melissa. Bought something else entirely. "Sweetheart," Grandpa said softly, placing his warm hand over mine, "your reaction at dinner told me you truly knew nothing." He swallowed. "But Melissa's reaction—" "Claire, something is very wrong." Hearing him say it out loud made the truth feel heavier. "Why would they do this to me?" I whispered. Grandpa shook his head. "I don't know. But we'll find out. And Claire, this money was intended for you, not your parents, not Melissa. You." His eyes hardened with a strength I'd rarely seen. "They cannot take your future without consequence." For the first time since dinner, I felt a sliver of clarity, a sliver of anger sharpened into resolve. I wasn't going to be quiet this time. I wasn't going to be swept aside. Whatever my parents and Melissa had done, whatever secret had sent her running from the table, I would uncover it. When I drove away from Grandpa's house, the fog had lifted, giving way to a rare streak of Oregon sun. It felt symbolic, as if the light were forcing itself in through every dark corner my family had tried to hide. Back at home, I made a list: dates, transfers, conversations, everything Grandpa had told me. I pulled bank statements he'd printed. I highlighted the line that held the weight of my stolen future: $450,000. A house meant for me. A gift meant to help me rebuild. And they had taken it. Maybe Melissa had taken all of it. Maybe all three of them had schemed together. Maybe I had never known my own family at all. My phone buzzed again. "This time, Melissa, we need to talk. Please, don't be angry. I can explain." I stared at the message, my pulse steady, my breath surprisingly calm. I typed one sentence, "Then start talking." She didn't respond. But it didn't matter, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else to define the truth. I was going to find it myself. And once I did, I would take back everything they stole from me, including the house, the trust they shattered, and the respect I should have had all along. I woke the next morning with the same heaviness in my stomach that had kept me awake most of the night. I brewed coffee I couldn't taste, got dressed without knowing what I put on, and drove to my parents' house, feeling like I was walking into a storm everyone else had prepared for, except me. Their neighborhood in Lake Oswego had always looked peaceful: perfect lawns, trimmed hedges, driveways glistening from early sprinklers. But that morning it all felt staged, a backdrop for a family pretending everything was fine. Mom opened the door before I could knock, as if she'd been waiting right behind it. Her eyes were puffy, though she tried to hide it with a quick smile. "Claire, honey, come in." I stepped inside and the air hit me immediately, too warm, too sweet, the smell of cinnamon rolls she baked whenever she wanted to smooth over conflict. I'd fallen for that tactic as a kid. I wasn't a kid anymore. Dad sat at the kitchen table, hands folded, jaw clenched. He didn't get up, didn't smile, just nodded stiffly like he was greeting a tax auditor rather than his daughter. Melissa wasn't there. "Sit, sweetheart," Mom whispered, placing a plate in front of me. I didn't touch it. Dad didn't bother pretending. I rested my palms on the table. "Where is Melissa?" Mom's mouth twitched. "She didn't sleep well. She's resting." "She ran out of dinner like she was caught doing something," I said quietly. Why Mom and Dad exchanged a look, one of those silent marital glances that carried paragraphs. They'd done that my whole life whenever the topic was uncomfortable or when Melissa was involved. For years I'd taken it as a sign of their closeness. Now I saw it differently, a secret language I wasn't allowed to understand. Dad cleared his throat. "Claire, let's not start with accusations. I'm asking a question I corrected." "Why did she run?" Mom let out a trembling breath. "This isn't about Melissa. It seems very much about Melissa, Mom." Dad's fist tightened on the table. "This entire thing has gotten blown out of proportion. Your grandfather, he didn't need to put you on the spot last night. It was unfair. Unfair." The word snapped out before I could stop it. Unfair is hearing for the first time in my life that someone bought me a house and you never told me. Mom flinched as if I'd hit her. Dad's jaw pulsed. Neither spoke. I leaned back slowly. "Grandpa sent the money last year. $450,000. For me. For my home. Why didn't you tell me?" Silence settled thick and suffocating. Mom wrung her hands. Dad looked at the counter instead of me. And that hesitation was all the answer I needed. They weren't confused. They weren't innocent. They were guilty. "Say something," I whispered. Mom swallowed hard. "Claire, you were going through so much. The divorce, the move to Seattle. You were barely functioning. We thought you needed space, not pressure." "Pressure?" I laughed under my breath, incredulous. Buying a home meant to help me was pressure. "We didn't want you to feel indebted," Mom insisted weakly. And Dad added, "We thought you wouldn't stay in Oregon. We thought it made more sense to hold on to the funds until you were settled." My skin prickled. They were lying, both of them. "Then why didn't you tell me?" I asked again. Mom's lip trembled. "We didn't want to overwhelm you, sweetheart." Overwhelm, divorce, stress. Their excuses piled higher with every breath. But none of it explained why Melissa had run away like a criminal. "Where is the money now?" I asked carefully. Dad's expression hardened. "That's not your concern." "Yes, it is." "Claire." His tone sharpened. Dad's authoritative voice, the one that shut down conversations. "This isn't about money. This is about family." "No," I said, voice steady, "it's exactly about money. And what you did with it." Mom's eyes filled with tears again. "Please don't raise your voice." "I'm not raising my voice. You're getting upset. You're not answering the question." Dad stood abruptly, the chair legs screeching against the tile. "Claire, enough. Your grandfather shouldn't have involved you. It was meant to be handled privately. Privately between who I asked. You and Melissa, because I wasn't part of that conversation." Mom choked out. "It wasn't like that." "Then explain," I demanded. But she couldn't. Dad pinched the bridge of his nose, pacing. "Look, we never meant for things to get this complicated. Melissa needed help. Her marriage has been strained. Jason lost his job. They were drowning, Claire. Drowning." My heart froze mid-beat. "Are you saying I whispered that you gave them my house money?" Mom burst into tears. Dad didn't answer, and that silence was confirmation. Hot, sickening confirmation. I pushed my chair back, breath shaking. "You stole the money Grandpa sent for me." Dad slammed his fist on the counter. "Don't use that word in this house." "What word, stole?" "Because that's what this is." "It was a temporary solution," Mom pleaded, reaching for me. I pulled away. "We were going to fix it. We just needed time." "A year," I said coldly. "You had a year." Dad stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Melissa needed that home, Claire. She and Jason were in trouble. And I wasn't, my voice cracked. When Jonathan left when I was selling my furniture just to break even when I could barely breathe, did you think I didn't need help? Mom's tears spilled. You've always been stronger. There it was. The original wound. The family script. You've always been stronger. I'd been hearing it since childhood whenever Melissa got her way, whenever she was excused, whenever I was told to give up my turn, my chance, my space. You're older, Claire. You're stronger. Let your sister have this. But this wasn't a toy. This wasn't a dress. This was a home, my future, my stability. Melissa is fragile, Mom whispered. You know this. I know she's manipulative, I whispered back. And you let her be. Dad's face reddened. Don't you dare speak about your sister like that. Then tell me why she ran from the table last night. Mom hiccuped. She panicked. Because she knew I said. She knew Grandpa had given the money to you for me. She knew the house was supposed to be mine. Neither of them denied it. Mom wiped her eyes. We didn't want you to resent her. I didn't resent her, I said. But I think I do now. Dad exhaled sharply, frustrated. You don't understand the full situation. Then explain it. He opened his mouth but closed it again. I stared at them both. Unreal. Absolutely unreal. I stood and grabbed my purse. Mom scrambled up. Claire, please don't leave like this. We can fix this. How I demanded. You spent the money. You bought the house for Melissa. You lied for a year. You let me believe I was on my own. Dad snapped. You were on your own by choice. My choice. My laugh was hollow. No, my divorce wasn't a choice. My exile was forced. And clearly my family's loyalty was never mine to begin with. I moved toward the door. Mom followed me, her voice trembling. Sweetheart, don't go to your grandfather, please. He'll see this the wrong way. There's only one way to see this, I said. And it's the truthful one. At the doorway, Dad said sharply, if you bring anyone else into this, you'll tear this family apart. I paused, hand on the doorknob. Then I looked back at him. The man who raised me, protected Melissa, and sacrificed me. I said quietly, Dad, you already tore it apart. I'm just finally looking at the pieces. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. The air was cold, but it felt cleaner than anything inside that house. As I walked to my car, one final thought crystallized sharp and undeniable. If they'd lied about something this massive, what else had they been hiding? Why had they chosen Melissa over me so easily? What did they fear would happen if the truth came out? I started the engine, heart pounding with clarity I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal. And I was done pretending otherwise. Tomorrow I would meet with someone who could help me answer every question they refused to a lawyer. The kind who didn't care about keeping families comfortable, only about uncovering the truth. If my family wanted me to stay quiet, they had underestimated the daughter they raised to be strong. I wasn't strong because I had to be. I was strong because they never left me another choice. The law office was smaller than I expected. Plain beige walls, a row of certificates in matching frames, and a receptionist whose voice was so soft I had to lean forward just to hear her ask me to sign in. But despite the simplicity of the place, something shifted inside me the moment I walked in, something like the first inhale after breaking the surface of deep water. Relief mixed with fear, certainty tangled with doubt. I wasn't used to fighting for myself. I wasn't used to being the one who pushed back instead of folding. But I also wasn't used to having $450,000 stolen from me. The receptionist pointed me toward a door at the end of the hall. Ms. Hartman, Attorney Caldwell is ready for you. I wiped my palms on my jeans before twisting the handle. Attorney Sophia Caldwell looked nothing like the sharp, severe lawyers I'd imagined. She was maybe in her late 40s, wore a burgundy sweater instead of a blazer, and had a warm, steady expression that made me feel safer than I had in days. Her desk was stacked with neat piles of papers, and she motioned for me to sit in one of the 2 chairs across from her. You must be Claire, she said, adjusting her glasses. Your grandfather called ahead. He said you might be stopping by. Of course he did. Grandpa wasn't one to wait for things to resolve themselves. Yes, I said, sitting. I think I need help. That's usually why people end up in this chair. She gave me a small smile. Why don't you tell me what's going on? I took a breath, steadying myself as I opened my folder, the one Grandpa and I had filled the night before with printouts of emails, bank transfers, and dates highlighted in yellow. My grandfather wired $450,000 to my parents last year, I began. The money was intended for me for a house specifically. He thought it would help me after my divorce, but I never knew about it. My parents never told me. And now? Sophia waited, pen poised. Now I believe they used the money to buy a house for my sister instead, a house in her name. And they didn't tell me because they didn't want me to know. Sophia wrote something quickly, then met my eyes. Did your grandfather specify in writing that the money was meant for you? Yes. I slid the printed email across the desk. Here. He emailed my mom saying the funds were for Claire's house purchase only. And here I slid the bank statement. The memo line reads, for Claire's home purchase, Lake Oswego area. Sophia nodded. That's very clear. And your parents acknowledged receipt of the funds? Yes. My mom replied, we'll handle everything. But apparently they handled everything except giving me what was mine. Sophia drummed her fingers lightly, thinking, do you know if the house your sister lives in was purchased around the same time? It was, I said, feeling anger reheat inside me, last February, and she lives in the house now, although she didn't admit it last night. Sophia paused. And you have reason to believe the funds your grandfather intended for you were diverted to that property. I don't have direct proof yet, I admitted. But the dates line up. Melissa's reaction last night was not innocent. And my parents couldn't explain anything without contradicting themselves. Understood, she said gently. This is very serious, Claire. Misusing funds designated for someone else, especially under documented intention, can be considered conversion or civil theft. There are also potential fraud implications. The words made the air feel heavier. Fraud, I repeated under my breath. Yes. A court would look at the written intention, the transfer, and the outcome. If the money was meant for you but was used to purchase an asset in someone else's name, that's misappropriation. I swallowed. So, what do I do? We need evidence, she said. Documents, deeds, financial records. But the foundation is strong. Let's start with what we can confirm. She clicked her keyboard and pulled up an online property search. You said your sister's house is in Lake Oswego, yes, on Alder Lane. Sophia typed the address. My breath caught when the property page appeared. The deed belonged entirely to Melissa Hartman. No mention of my parents' names, no mention of joint ownership, no mention of a loan co-signer, although there was a lien indicating a home equity loan had been taken out shortly after the purchase. My pulse pounded. They refinanced it. Looks like it, Sophia said. That suggests they used it as collateral for something. Do you know what? No, I whispered. But Melissa always had debt issues. She and Jason, my voice trailed. Sophia clicked through a few more screens, then sat back. Claire, I want to be honest. We can build a strong civil case, especially with your grandfather's documentation. But before we file anything, I suggest you gather as much information as possible quietly. Don't confront them again. Don't accuse them directly. Just observe. I nodded. I understood. But inside me, emotions churned: anger, betrayal, confusion, fear. How had my own family orchestrated something like this without guilt eating them alive? Sophia continued, You also need to prepare yourself mentally. These cases are painful. When family is involved, it rarely stays clean. People will get defensive. They may try to frame you as ungrateful or dramatic. A sad, humorless laugh escaped me. They already are. She gave me a sympathetic look. Get copies of everything related to the house. We'll proceed once we know the extent of misappropriation. When I left the office, Oregon drizzle had turned into real, rain-cold, steady sheets falling as if the sky had been holding its breath until I walked outside. I sat in my car, forehead against the steering wheel, letting the rain swallow the silence. Fraud, civil theft, misappropriation. Words that didn't belong to warm family dinners or holiday gatherings. Words that belonged in courtrooms and crime shows. But they were the words that described what my parents and sister had done. My phone buzzed. "Melissa, again." "Claire, please answer. We can fix this." I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to Lake Oswego straight to Alder Lane. I wasn't sure whether it was courage or recklessness that guided me there, but something in me needed to see the truth with my own eyes. Her house, my house, sat at the end of the cul-de-sac beneath towering cedars. 2 stories, sage green exterior wraparound porch, the kind of home I'd pictured myself in during the darkest months after my divorce. A home where I could breathe, rebuild, start over. Melissa's SUV was in the driveway. Lights were on inside. Through the front window, I saw her pacing the living room phone in hand, hair pulled into a messy bun. She kept wiping her eyes and glancing toward the door like she expected someone me to walk in. She paused, stared at her phone screen, then threw herself onto the couch and covered her face. For a fleeting moment, I felt pity. Then I remembered her running from the table. I remembered my parents' excuses, their lies. I remembered the $450,000 that disappeared into a house I was never allowed to know about. And the pity evaporated. I sat in my car watching Melissa's silhouette move through the rooms as freely as if she owned the air inside them, which she did on paper. I let the anger settle, not red-hot or impulsive, but cold and clear. Sophia's voice echoed in my mind. "Gather quietly." So I did. I took pictures of the house, the car, the mailbox, with her name printed neatly. I recorded the timestamps. I gathered evidence not for revenge, but for justice. When I finally drove away, dusk had begun to settle over the neighborhood, the streetlights blinking on like tiny, watchful eyes. My sister lived inside a dream that belonged to me, and I was going to take it back, not out of spite, not out of jealousy, but because it was mine. Stolen things have a way of finding their way home, especially when the person they were stolen from finally stops being afraid to ask for them back. As the rain softened to a mist and the city lights reflected on the wet streets, I realized something else. The girl who left for Seattle broken and defeated wasn't the same woman who had returned. This woman wasn't afraid anymore. This woman was ready to fight, and the first battle would start tomorrow with the deed office. I arrived at the county deed office the next morning, just as the doors unlocked, the air still damp with Oregon fog. The building smelled like coffee and old paper, and fluorescent lights buzzed as clerks settled into their cubicles. It wasn't the kind of place where dramatic revelations usually happened, but I felt like I was walking into a vault that held the truth my family had been hiding from me for a year. A woman with cropped gray hair and bright purple glasses greeted me at the front counter. "Morning. How can I help you?" I swallowed hard, gripping the folder in my hands. "I need a copy of property records for a house on Alder Lane in Lake Oswego. Specifically, I need the purchase details and the title history." She nodded, typing quickly. Address I gave it, forcing my voice to stay steady. Her eyebrows lifted. "That's a nice area," I didn't respond. My stomach twisted as she clicked through the documents. "Here we go," she said. "This parcel was purchased last February. Closed on the 21st. Buyer listed as Melissa Hartman." There it was. In black and white. Melissa's name, no shared ownership, no trust account, no mention of my parents except in the mailing address for tax statements. "Can I get copies?" I asked quietly. "Of course. Printed or digital? Both." She printed the deed, the loan records, the refinancing documents, and even the county tax history. Each sheet felt heavier than the last. When she reached the refinancing page, she paused. "Looks like they pulled out a home equity line of credit a few months after purchase," she said. "Significant one." "How significant?" She checked the numbers. $250,000. My throat tightened. They hadn't just used the stolen money to buy the house, they'd borrowed even more against it. My sister and parents weren't just dishonest. They were financially drowning, desperate enough to use my future as collateral. "Thank you," I murmured, gathering the papers with trembling hands. "Anything else?" the clerk asked kindly. I hesitated. "Is there any record of the funding source? Where the original purchase money came from?" She shook her head. "Not on our end, but the title company would have it. You can request a copy of the settlement statement from them." I nodded. "I'll do that." I stepped outside into the cold, gripping the documents like lifelines. My phone buzzed with a message from Melissa again. "Claire, please. We need to talk. I never wanted you to find out this way." I didn't respond, not yet. Instead, I drove to the title office. The receptionist checked her system and retrieved the settlement statement. One glance at the incoming funds column made my stomach drop. Origin of wire, Hartman household, checking $450,000. They used the exact amount Grandpa sent. Precisely. No hesitation, no attempt to disguise it. My name appeared nowhere, not as purchaser, not as beneficiary, not even in side notes. It was Melissa's windfall, and my erasure. I left the office feeling like the ground beneath me had tilted. People walked past me, oblivious to the betrayal unfolding inside my chest. Cars hummed along the road, normal life continuing, while mine cracked open seam by seam. I drove aimlessly for a while, ending up at a viewpoint overlooking the river. With trembling fingers, I spread the documents across the passenger seat. The wind coming through the cracked window rustled the pages, but the truth stared back unshaken. They knew it was mine. They took it anyway, and they built a life out of my stolen foundation. My phone buzzed again, this time from my mother. "Claire, please come home today. We should talk as a family. Don't involve your grandfather. It will break his heart." Break his heart. They'd already done that. They'd broken mine, too. My phone buzzed again. "Melissa, I never meant to hurt you. Please let me explain. Don't go to a lawyer. We can fix this." My chest tightened. So she knew about the lawyer. She must have talked to Mom. They were scrambling now, panicking, not because they loved me, but because they feared consequences. I leaned back in my seat, staring at the river's gray ripples. The betrayal hit me in waves, sharp, cold, unrelenting. They'd watched me leave Oregon for Seattle with nothing but 2 suitcases and a fractured heart. They'd watched me struggle financially, emotionally, mentally. They'd watched me work a second job to stay afloat, all while they sat on $450,000 meant to give me stability. Why, I whispered to the empty car, why would you do this to me? There was no answer, only my own reflection, in the window eyes shining with hurt I didn't want to let spill. After a long moment, I exhaled, wiped my eyes, and gathered the documents. There was only one place I could go next. One person who deserved to see the truth before I did anything official. Grandpa. I drove to his house, feeling the weight of every mile. When he opened the door, his face lit up until he saw my expression. Sweetheart. What happened? I stepped inside and laid the documents on his kitchen table. His hand trembled as he reached for the deed. For a long moment he said nothing. His eyes scanned the papers, purchase dates, wired amounts, Melissa's name in bold letters. His jaw tightened. His usually gentle expression hardened into something I'd never seen from him before. "They stole it," he whispered. "They really stole it." I nodded, throat tight. "And they refinanced it. They're deeper in debt than they've ever been." Grandpa sank into his chair, shoulders heavy. "I trusted them. I trusted your mother to do what was right." His voice cracked. "I gave that money to help you start again. But they helped themselves instead." I sat beside him. "I'm so sorry, Grandpa." He shook his head. "No, I'm sorry. I never should have gone through them. I should have given it directly to you." He looked at the documents again, anger simmering in his eyes. "They took advantage of you and of me." I hesitated. "There's more." His gaze lifted. "The lawyer says, 'With this documentation, I have a strong civil case. They misused funds intended for me. I can legally force the property to be transferred back." Grandpa exhaled deeply, closing his eyes for a moment. "As you should. They have to face the consequences." Then he added quietly, "Even if it breaks the family apart." My chest squeezed. Dad said the same thing. That if I told anyone I'd tear the family apart. Grandpa snorted. "Your father lost the right to lecture you about family the moment he kept this from you." For the first time in days, I felt the fire in me steady rather than burn chaotically. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything pressing in around us. Finally, Grandpa said, "Sweetheart, you need to be very careful from here. Your parents, Melissa, they will try to guilt you, manipulate you, make you feel like you're the one doing something wrong." "I know. Don't fall for it. You didn't create this situation." "They did." I nodded, grateful for his clarity. Before I left, Grandpa placed his hand over mine. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly, "for standing up for yourself. It's long overdue." I drove home feeling steadier, but that calm shattered when I pulled into my driveway and saw someone sitting on my porch steps. Melissa. She stood when she saw me, eyes, red arms wrapped around herself like she was bracing for a storm. "Claire," she whispered, stepping closer, "please, please don't do this." I didn't move. "Do what you went to a lawyer." Her voice cracked. "Mom told me." And you can't. You don't understand. Things are complicated. Jason, he's out of work. We had medical bills. We were drowning. We used my house money to save yourselves," I finished. "I understand perfectly." Tears spilled down her cheeks. I didn't want to. "I told Mom it wasn't right, but she said you'd be fine, that you'd bounce back. You always do." And I whispered. "So it was easier to sacrifice me than to accept responsibility for your own life." She flinched. "Please, Claire, I'm begging you. If you go through with this, we'll lose everything. You lost everything," I said softly, "the moment you stole mine." She shook her head, crying harder. "You're my sister. Please, don't ruin us." Her words were knives, but not sharp enough to cut away the truth. "I'm not ruining anything," I said. "I'm reclaiming what was meant for me." Melissa covered her mouth, sobbing. "Claire, please, I'm so scared." For a second, only a second, I felt my resolve waver. Then I remembered the deed, my name missing, my parents' lies, the year I spent struggling alone. "I'm sorry, Melissa," I said quietly. "But you should be scared." She stared at me, eyes wide with panic, then ran to her car and drove off, a flash of Alyssa blue taillights disappearing down the street. I stood there on my porch, the cold wind whipping around me, my heart aching yet unshaken. There was no turning back. My family had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and I was done paying the price for their choices. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind replayed Melissa's tear-streaked face on my porch, begging me not to ruin the family, as if she hadn't already torn it apart long before I ever walked into a lawyer's office. I lay awake until dawn, staring at my ceiling, listening to the rain tapping restlessly against my window, like it was urging me forward. By the time morning came, I had made a decision. I wasn't waiting anymore. I was going to get the rest of the documents, loan statements, refinancing contracts, anything that tied Melissa and my parents to the misuse of Grandpa's money. And I knew exactly where those papers would be, my parents' house. They weren't the type to use digital storage. My mom still printed out online receipts just in case. Everything important was always tucked inside the same cherrywood filing cabinet in Dad's study. And since Melissa's panicked reaction last night told me they were scrambling, I knew I had a small window before they tried to hide or destroy anything. I dressed, grabbed my keys, and headed out while the world was still foggy and half asleep. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, their house looked deceptively peaceful. Birds perched on the maple tree out front. A newspaper sat neatly folded on the porch. Nothing looked broken, even though the truth festering inside felt like a bomb waiting to detonate. I rang the doorbell. Mom opened the door, her expression tight and exhausted. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Her eyes flicked over me with a mix of guilt and fear. "Claire," she murmured, stepping aside. "Come in." I walked past her without speaking. Dad was in the kitchen gripping a mug of coffee like it was the only thing holding him upright. His jaw clenched when he saw me. "We need to talk," he said. "We will," I replied, "after I get what I came for." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "I want the documents," I said calmly. "The refinancing paperwork, the settlement statements, any contracts you or Melissa signed regarding the Alder Lane property." Dad slammed the mug onto the counter, coffee sloshing over the side. "Absolutely not." Mom flinched. "Please, both of you, let's not start like this." I looked at her. "Mom, you can either give me the documents or I'll subpoena them. Your choice. But one way or another, I'm getting them." Her face crumpled. "How can you talk to us like this?" "Like what?" I asked quietly. "Like someone you stole from, like someone you lied to, like someone who deserved better." She covered her mouth, tears forming again. Dad stepped closer, voice low and sharp. "You think you're the victim here, Claire. After everything we've done for you, everything we've sacrificed, you walk into our house and accuse us of stealing from our own daughter." My jaw tightened. "Dad, there's an email. There's a documented wire transfer. There's a deed with Melissa's name on it. I'm not accusing, I'm stating facts." "We did what we had to do," he snapped. There it was. The truth behind the panic. Why, I asked. Why did you have to do it? Dad turned away. Mom wiped her eyes, trembling. "You don't understand," she whispered. "Melissa, she was drowning. Jason lost his job. Their medical expenses." "Stop," I cut in. "You're explaining what you did with the money. I'm asking why you thought stealing it from me was the solution." Mom closed her eyes. Dad exhaled through clenched teeth. Finally, Mom whispered, "Because you always land on your feet. You're strong, you're independent. Melissa isn't. She needed it more." My heart cracked in two. There it was, the quiet favoritism I'd felt my entire life finally spoken aloud. The invisible scale they used to weigh our value. The belief that Melissa deserved saving more than I did, so you sacrificed my future to protect hers. "No," Mom choked. "We didn't think of it like that. But that's exactly what it was," I said. Dad's voice hardened. "You were doing fine in Seattle, better than fine. We didn't think you needed the money." "I didn't," I said, "because I didn't know it existed." That shut them both up. Silence stretched tight across the room. I took a steadying breath. "I'm going to the study. I want the documents." Dad moved to block the hallway. "You're not taking anything," he said. "Not until we talk this through." I met his gaze without blinking. "Dad, if you force me to escalate this legally, there will be criminal implications." His eyes widened just enough to confirm he knew exactly how serious the situation was. "Don't threaten us," he growled. "I'm stating reality," I replied. "But we can keep this civil if you give me what I came for." Mom touched his arm gently. "Charles, please, let her. Fighting her will only make it worse." He hesitated but moved aside. I walked down the hallway, my heart pounding. The study door creaked open, revealing the same room I'd done homework in as a teenager. The same bookshelves, the same worn armchair where Dad used to read the news every morning. But the air felt colder now, heavy with betrayal. I knelt beside the cherry wood filing cabinet. The moment I opened the drawer, my breath caught. Right on top, almost too conveniently, was a manila folder labeled Alder Lane Documents. I pulled it out, hands shaking as I opened it. Inside were copies of everything: the loan application, the refinancing contract, the settlement statement. And worst of all, emails between Melissa and my parents discussing the purchase. The first email was from Melissa. "If Claire finds out, she'll lose it. You promised you'd handle the money quietly. She doesn't need a house anyway. She's moving to Seattle. It makes more sense for us to use it." My lungs tightened. The next was from my mother. "We'll tell her Grandpa gave us a smaller amount for emergencies. She never has to know." Dad's reply: "We're doing the right thing. Claire will manage. Melissa can't." For a moment I couldn't breathe. My own family had considered me unnecessary, disposable, an afterthought. I scanned the papers quickly, taking photos of everything. Then I placed the folder back exactly as I'd found it. When I stepped out of the study, Mom and Dad were waiting in the hallway. Mom's eyes widened when she saw my expression. "Claire, please, we were desperate." Dad looked defiant, not remorseful. We had to prioritize the child who needed the most help. My voice was steady, even though everything inside me was collapsing. "You prioritized the child who shouted the loudest," I said. "Who manipulated you? Who let you believe she was helpless?" Dad bristled. "Melissa has struggled her entire life." "And I haven't," I asked. "You didn't see me struggle because I didn't make you watch." Mom stepped forward, reaching for me. "Sweetheart," I flinched backward. "No," I whispered. "You don't get to call me that right now." The hurt in her face was instant, but I didn't apologize. Not this time. I walked toward the door. Dad's voice followed me. "If you take legal action, Claire, we may never recover from this." I paused with my hand on the doorknob. "You should have thought about that," I said quietly, "before you stole from me." I left without looking back. In the driveway, the morning air stung my cheeks as I climbed into my car. My hands trembled as I gripped the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the shock of finally seeing the truth laid bare. They hadn't stumbled into a mistake. They had made choices, deliberate, documented choices, and none of them had included protecting me. My chest ached as I drove away, the weight of what came next pressing down on me. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for the version of myself I had been forced to abandon, the daughter who believed her family would choose her when it mattered. Now I knew better. And now I was choosing myself. I drove straight to Sophia Caldwell's office without calling ahead, the manila folder on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked unfamiliar. Cheeks flushed, jaw clenched, eyes bright with the kind of betrayal that didn't fade overnight. When I walked into the law office, the receptionist didn't even ask if I had an appointment. One look at my face and she simply pointed toward the same hallway. "Go on in. She's free." Sophia looked up from her desk when I entered, eyebrows lifting slightly at my expression. "You found something." I sat, opened the folder, and spread the printed emails across her desk like evidence at a crime scene. My fingers trembled, not with fear, but with clarity. "These," I said. "This is everything." Sophia scanned the pages quickly, her calm expression sharpening as she read. Emails, loan documents, refinancing, the settlement statement. And, oof, she lifted the printed messages between my parents and Melissa. "She never has to know. Claire will manage. We're doing the right thing." She let out a long, slow exhale. "This isn't just misappropriation," she said. "It's intentional, coordinated, documented." My heart pounded. "So, what does that mean?" I asked. She folded her hands. "It means your case just became extremely strong. With written evidence that your parents and sister knowingly diverted funds intended for you, we have grounds for civil conversion, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and financial exploitation." The word exploitation hit me like a physical blow. I'd always been the strong one, the independent one, the child who never asked for anything. It had never occurred to me that they might use that against me. Sophia continued, "We can file a demand letter requiring them to transfer the property to you voluntarily. If they refuse, we take it to court. Based on these documents, a judge would almost certainly rule in your favor." Her voice softened. "Claire, you have every right to pursue this. What they did was wrong, no matter how they try to justify it." I nodded, blinking away the sting in my eyes. "I know." "What do you want to do?" she asked gently. I took a breath. "I want the house. I want my grandfather's gift honored. And your parents and sister?" I hesitated. The anger in me burned, but beneath it lay something far heavier, grief. Grief for the family I thought I had. Grief for trust I couldn't recover. "I don't want to ruin their lives," I said quietly, "but I won't sacrifice mine to protect them." "A reasonable stance," she said. and one the law supports. She pulled out a form. Let's draft the demand letter. As she typed, I sat in silence listening to the soft click of keys. Each sound felt like a nail sealing a coffin, one that held the version of my family I'd loved blindly for 35 years. When she finished, she turned the monitor toward me. The letter was firm, concise, and devastating. It demanded the immediate transfer of the Alder Lane property into my name. It cited the transfer memo from Grandpa, the explicit email instructions, and the evidence of coordinated misuse. It warned of civil action and damages if they refused. My hand shook as I signed it. "Are you sure?" Sophia asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "For the first time in my life, I'm sure." She nodded and sent the letter. There was no going back now. When I walked out of her office, the sky had shifted from gray to a muted silver, like the world couldn't decide whether it wanted to rain or clear. I got into my car and stared at my phone, half expecting a message from my mother or father, some frantic attempt to stall what they already sensed was coming. But instead, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I answered cautiously. "Hello." A shaky breath came through the speaker. "Claire." I froze. It was Jason, my brother-in-law. He sounded exhausted, his voice frayed at the edges. "Jason, why are you calling?" He let out a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "Because things are bad. Worse than you know." I swallowed tension coiling in my stomach. "I know about the house. I know what they did." "No," he said quickly. "There's more. More than Melissa told you. More than your parents know." Cold washed through me. "What do you mean?" There was a long pause. I could hear him moving, maybe pacing. Finally, he said quietly, "Can you meet me later, somewhere neutral? Somewhere Melissa won't follow." Alarm bells rang in my head. "Why me?" I asked. "Because..." His voice cracked. "Because I think I owe you the truth. And after this, I don't know where my marriage is going. But you deserve to know everything." My pulse quickened. "Jason, are you in danger?" "No," he said. "Not physically. But everything is about to fall apart. And you should hear it from me before someone else tries to twist it." I closed my eyes. Where Riverbend Park, the North Bench, 5 o'clock. The line went dead. I leaned back in my seat, trying to steady my breathing. Jason wasn't dramatic. He wasn't emotional. He was a quiet, steady presence who rarely raised his voice or inserted himself into conflict. For him to call me not my sister, not my parents, meant something enormous was boiling beneath the surface. Something Melissa had kept hidden even from Mom and Dad. Something tied to the house, or the loan, or maybe something even darker. I left early. I couldn't sit still at home with my thoughts racing. I parked near the river and walked toward the North Bench, the Willamette River flowing quietly beyond the trees. The wind carried the scent of wet pine and distant rain. Jason arrived 10 minutes late, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His hair was uncombed, his eyes were rimmed red, his clothes hung loosely on him as if he'd lost weight quickly. "Claire," he said, sinking onto the bench. I sat beside him, unsure of what to expect. "What's going on?" He rubbed his hands together. "Melissa didn't tell you everything. She didn't tell your parents everything either. And before this explodes, I want you to hear the truth." He paused, gathering himself. Then he said, "The home equity loan wasn't used to pay off our debts." A chill crawled up my spine. "Then what was it used for?" I whispered. He let out a shaky breath. "A business venture. One that failed, horribly." My stomach dropped. "Jason, I didn't want to use the house as collateral," he said quickly. "I told Melissa it was a terrible idea. But she insisted. She said your parents would never find out. She said it was our chance to start over. She said we deserved something for once." My chest tightened. "And you believed her," he bowed his head. "I believed in us. And we lost everything, every dollar. The investment collapsed 2 months ago. And now the bank is pressuring us. We're behind on payments. They're threatening foreclosure. Foreclosure. On my house. The house bought with my grandfather's money. A hot wave of anger surged through my chest, but Jason kept speaking, almost desperate now. I told her to come clean, he said. I begged her. But she refused. She said your parents would blame her. She said you would hate her forever. She said if the truth came out, our marriage wouldn't survive. He looked at me, defeated. She wasn't wrong. We sat in silence, the wind rustling the trees above us. Finally, I asked, "Why tell me now?" He blinked hard. "Because the bank is moving fast. And if you take legal action, which you should, everything will surface anyway. And I couldn't let you walk blind into this." He let out a broken laugh. "You deserved that house. You needed that house. And we ruined it before you ever saw it." My throat tightened painfully. "Why didn't Melissa tell me this? Because she's terrified," he whispered. "She's always been terrified of failing, of disappointing your parents, of losing everything. And now the truth is catching up." I swallowed hard. "Jason, is the house in danger of being seized?" He nodded slowly. "Yes." Soon, he nodded again. The wind stilled. My family hadn't just stolen my house. They had destroyed it. The betrayal cut deeper than I knew betrayal could reach. Not just through theft, but through recklessness. Desperation. Deceit that spiraled so far out of control, no one knew how to stop it. Jason turned to me, then eyes hollow. "Whatever you decide to do next. I'm sorry, Claire. Truly." He stood and walked away, leaving me alone on the bench with the truth swirling around me like smoke. My house wasn't just stolen. It was sinking. And if I didn't act fast, I wouldn't just lose it. I'd lose any chance of reclaiming what was rightfully mine. Tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. I sat in my car after Jason left, staring at the river until the sky began to darken. The wind rippled across the water, carrying a bitter kind of cold that settled into my bones. Foreclosure. The word kept repeating in my mind like a warning bell. My house, Grandpa's gift, was circling a drain I didn't even know existed. And Melissa had let it happen. My own parents had let it happen. They had gambled with something that wasn't theirs. Something meant to be the foundation of my second chance. Something meant to heal me after everything I'd lost. I drove home slowly, my thoughts tangled and sharp. Every red light, every turn, every stretch of road felt surreal. When I finally walked inside, I set my keys on the counter and sank onto the couch, letting the silence swallow me. I didn't cry. Not yet. The anger was too hot, too steady, too painfully clear for tears. Instead, I grabbed the folder of documents and laid everything out on my coffee table, the emails, the loan statements, the settlement records. And then finally, the foreclosure warnings Jason had taken pictures of on his phone and sent to me as I drove home. My house was in real danger, and they had done nothing. My phone buzzed. A call. Grandpa. I hesitated before answering. The moment I heard his voice, all the tightness in my chest loosened just a little. "Claire. How did it go with the attorney?" I closed my eyes. "Grandpa. There's more. I told him everything about Jason, about the failed business venture, about the home equity loan, about the foreclosure notices. With each revelation, his breathing grew heavier. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then he said in a voice I'd never heard from him before, quiet, hollow, wounded. "They didn't just misuse my money, they destroyed it. That broke something in me. Grandpa, I'm so sorry." "No," he said firmly. "I'm sorry. I trusted the wrong people. And I hurt you in the process." I felt my throat tighten. "You didn't hurt me." "They did." His voice shook. "Tell me what comes next, sweetheart." I inhaled slowly, steadying myself. "I'm going to stop the foreclosure. I'm going to take back the house legally. And then we'll figure out the rest." "Good," he whispered. "You deserve justice. And I will support you every step of the way." That night, I barely slept again. My mind raced with possibilities, legal angles, financial strategies, timelines, worst-case scenarios. If the bank moved too quickly, the house could be auctioned before we even filed the claim. Everything depended on speed and precision. By morning, I was running on determination alone. I drove straight to the bank, listed on the loan documents, the folder clutched under my arm. The building was sleek, modern, almost cold. Inside, the lobby smelled like polished floors and printer toner. A man in a navy suit approached when I stepped inside. "Welcome. How can I assist you today? I need to speak with someone about a property in foreclosure," I said quietly. "Urgently." His expression shifted professional concern mixed with curiosity. "Of course. Right this way." He led me to a glass-walled office where a woman in her early 50s sat behind a desk covered in financial reports. She looked up as we entered. "This is Ms. Hartman," the man said. "She has questions regarding a foreclosure case." Her eyebrows arched. "A Hartman, which property? Alder Lane." I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her face changed instantly, recognition, mixed with something else. Something like pity. "Please sit." I did. "First," she said softly, "I'm sorry you're dealing with this. The situation on that property is complicated." "I'm aware," I said. "But I need to know exactly how much time we have, and what options exist." She nodded and pulled up the account records on her screen. "The loan is severely delinquent," she said. "Multiple missed payments. And the refinance was ambitious." Ambitious. A polite word for reckless. "How soon until the house is seized?" I asked. She hesitated. "The final notice goes out next week. If nothing changes, the property will be scheduled for auction in approximately 30 days. My breath left me in a slow, cold wave. 30 days. Only 30 days before my house was gone forever. "Is there anything that can stop the foreclosure payments?" she said. "A full reinstatement or proof of pending legal action that establishes contested ownership." I straightened. So, a legal claim could delay the foreclosure. Yes, not permanently, but long enough to resolve ownership. Hope flickered faintly inside my chest. "Ms. Hartman," she added gently, "are you aware that you are not the legal owner of the property?" "I'm aware," I said. "But I have evidence proving the money used to purchase the home was mine, not my parents', not my sister's, mine." She studied me for a long moment, something shifting behind her eyes. "Then you have every right to fight for it," she said quietly. "Families. They make mistakes, some bigger than others. But if the home was intended for you, you should not lose it because of someone else's choices." The kindness in her words almost undid me. "What do I need to provide?" I asked. "Proof," she said. "Documents. A demand letter. Evidence of intent. I have all of that." She folded her hands. "Then I suggest filing a claim as soon as possible. If you or your attorney submit notice of disputed ownership, the bank will freeze foreclosure proceedings temporarily." "Temporarily is enough," I said. "It buys us time." When I left the bank, I called Sophia immediately. "File it," I told her. "File the ownership dispute today." She didn't hesitate. "I'll get it done." That afternoon, a certified letter from her office was sent to the county court, the bank, and my parents' home. It stated the following: the Alder Lane property was purchased with funds exclusively intended for Claire Hartman. The current deed holder obtained the property through fraudulent misappropriation of designated funds. Legal ownership is hereby contested. It was official. But the official fight was only one part of the storm that was coming. The other part arrived at dusk. I was in my kitchen reheating leftovers when I heard a frantic pounding on my front door. Not knocking, pounding. I froze, then opened it. My mother stood on my porch, hair disheveled, eyes red and wet, breathing hard as if she'd run all the way from Lake Oswego to my doorstep. "Claire," she sobbed, grabbing my arm. "What have you done?" I stood completely still. I did what I had to. She shook her head violently. "You sent a legal notice. Your father is furious. Melissa is devastated. We didn't think you'd actually... How could you? How could you turn this into a legal war? I pulled away from her grip. Mom, you stole from me. No, she cried. We borrowed from you. There's a difference. You never intended to return it. She flinched. We hoped things would get better. We thought the investment would work. We thought we could repay the money and fix everything before you found out. And now, she covered her mouth, choking on sobs. Now everything is collapsing. Her voice lowered to a whisper. You're going to destroy your sister. My voice hardened into something cold. Melissa destroyed herself the moment she signed her name on a house bought with money that wasn't hers. Mom shook her head. You don't understand. She's falling apart. Jason told her he might leave. She can't sleep. She can't eat. She's terrified she's going to lose everything. She was never entitled to any of it, I said. Mom stared at me, stunned, like she was seeing me for the first time, as if she finally realized I wasn't bending this time. Her voice cracked. You're not the daughter I raised. The words hit like a slap, but I didn't let them break me. No, I said softly. I'm stronger. She staggered back, tears blurring her vision. Please, she whispered, voice breaking. Please don't take the house. Please don't let the bank take it. There has to be another way. There is, I said. They signed the house over to me. Now, before the auction. She stared at me, her breathing trembling. That will destroy Melissa, she said again. I inhaled slow and deep. I'm done sacrificing myself to save her. Mom's tears fell harder. She stepped back off the porch, shaking her head like she couldn't understand how her eldest daughter had become someone who could fight back. But I understood. I didn't become this woman overnight. They made me. Go home, Mom, I said quietly. Think about what comes next. Because I have. She looked at me one last time, broken, pleading, terrified, and then turned and walked down the driveway. When the door closed behind me, I pressed my palms to the wood, breathing slowly, letting the silence settle. The battle lines were drawn, and I was no longer standing alone. I woke the next morning to a stream of unread messages, missed calls from Dad, texts from Mom begging me to pause everything, a long paragraph from Melissa alternating between apologies, accusations, and threats. I didn't respond to any of them. The buzzing of my phone became background noise as I got dressed, packed my folder, and prepared for the next phase meeting with the bank's foreclosure specialist and finalizing the injunction. I wasn't just fighting for a house anymore. I was fighting against a lifetime of being overlooked, dismissed, and used. By the time I arrived at the courthouse, Oregon's sky had shifted to a stormy slate gray. The wind whipped my hair into my face as I jogged up the steps clutching my documents. Inside, the hallways smelled of old wood and disinfectant. People moved with purpose, each of them carrying their own disaster. Today, I was one of them. Sophia was already waiting at the front bench of the county clerk's office, her dark hair neatly pinned back, her expression calm but sharp. You're right on time, she said. The clerk is processing our request. What happens next? I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. She handed me a copy of the injunction request. Once this is filed, the foreclosure is legally paused. It buys us significant time. I exhaled, the relief washing over me. One hurdle down, dozens more ahead. But I wasn't alone, not anymore. The clerk called Sophia's name. Papers were stamped, signatures exchanged. And just like that, the Alder Lane property was frozen. Safe. For now. As we walked outside, Sophia said I'd recommend a forensic accountant next. We need the paper trail to be airtight. My stomach clenched. This was becoming bigger than I'd imagined. More formal, more public, more real. Do we have to? I asked. If we want to ensure the house is transferred and protected, she said yes. I nodded. Okay, let's do it. But as I walked toward my car, a figure stepped out from behind a pillar. Dad. He looked older than he had 2 days ago, the strain etched into the lines around his mouth and eyes. His expression was a mixture of anger, exhaustion, and something else, something like heartbreak. We need to talk, he said. I stiffened. I don't think we do. Yes, he said firmly, we do. He glanced at Sophia. Alone. She raised an eyebrow at me. You don't have to talk to him. I inhaled slowly. It's fine, I'll be okay. She nodded. Call me if you need anything. When she walked off, Dad stepped closer. Claire, he began, do you have any idea what you've done? My jaw clenched. I protected myself. Something you should have done for me. He shook his head, disbelief flashing across his face. Do you think the bank cares about your injunction? They'll still pursue us. They'll still come after us for the unpaid loan. Your actions didn't solve anything. They escalated everything. I crossed my arms. Good. Maybe consequences will finally teach you something. His voice dropped low and bitter. You sound just like your grandfather. That's a compliment. He exhaled sharply, nostrils flaring. You are tearing this family to pieces. I stepped closer, meeting his eyes without flinching. Dad, the family was already torn the moment you chose Melissa over me. I'm just refusing to go along with the lie. I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm, not hard, but firmly enough to make me stop. I did what I thought was right, he said. I did what any father would do. I pulled my arm free. Then you're a father to one daughter only. The words hit him like a blow. His mouth parted, but no sound came out. His shoulders sagged. For the first time since this started, I saw the truth. He wasn't just angry. He was ashamed. And he didn't know what to do with that. I walked away without waiting for a response. Some part of me expected him to call out after me. But he didn't. He let me go. When I got home, I expected to collapse. Instead, I found something on my porch. A box, no label, no note. Just my name written in Melissa's handwriting. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were several items, small, old, worn. A framed photo of us as kids standing knee-deep in the Columbia River holding hands. A friendship bracelet I made her when I was 10. A seashell necklace she bought me during a family vacation. A folded program from my high school graduation with Melissa's doodles on the back. At the bottom was a letter. I sat on the porch steps and unfolded it, bracing myself. Claire, I know you think I'm a monster right now. Maybe I am. Maybe I deserve that. But I swear to you I didn't mean to hurt you. Things spiraled faster than I expected. I was scared. I made terrible decisions. And now everything is falling apart because of me. You were always stronger than me. You always seemed okay. I thought you didn't need the help. I thought you wouldn't even want the house. I don't know what I thought. I guess I wasn't thinking at all. I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything. I know it's not enough. But I'm saying it anyway. I don't want to lose you, Claire. Please don't let this be the end. Melissa. The tears came then, not because I forgave her, but because she had finally said something real. Something that wasn't wrapped in excuses or self-preservation. But honesty wasn't the same as repair. Not even close. I set the letter aside and stared out at the quiet street, letting the cool air dry my tears. My phone buzzed with another message. This time from an unknown number. Ms. Hartman, this is Detective Rowell with the Lake Oswego Police Department. We received notice from the bank regarding suspected financial misconduct involving the Alder Lane property. We need to speak with you as soon as possible. My breath caught. This was no longer just a civil matter. It was becoming criminal. The next day I sat in a small interview room at the police station, my palms sweating despite the cold air conditioning. Detective Rowell was a tall man with kind eyes and a professional calm that made me feel safe. He took notes as I explained everything: Grandpa's transfer, my parents' emails, the loan, the foreclosure, Jason's confession. When I finished, he leaned back, studying me carefully. This is serious, he said. Very serious. The misuse of designated funds, the forged explanations, the refinancing, they create a pattern of deception. Depending on evidence, charges could range from fraud to financial exploitation. My stomach twisted. I don't want them arrested. He nodded. But you do want the truth acknowledged. Yes. And the house restored to you. Yes. He folded his hands. Then you may need to testify if this moves forward. Family cases are always complicated, but your documentation is strong. I left the station feeling like I'd been hollowed out. The weight of everything sat heavily on my shoulders. The legal battle, the foreclosure, the broken pieces of my family scattered across the last few days. When I got home, Grandpa was sitting on my porch steps, hands folded in his lap waiting for me. I sat beside him, resting my head on his shoulder the way I had when I was a little girl. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "I don't feel like I did." "Doing the right thing," he replied, "rarely feels good when it involves people we love." I swallowed hard. "I don't know if I can forgive them." "You don't have to," he said gently. "Forgiveness is not the same as surrender. Sometimes protecting yourself is the only act of love you can offer to yourself and to them." We sat in silence for a long moment, watching the sky dim into twilight. Finally, Grandpa said, "You're stronger than you know, Claire. But strength doesn't mean you have to go through this alone." I closed my eyes. For the first time since this started, I believed him. Maybe I was strong, just not in the way they thought quiet and compliant. I was strong in the way that fought back. And I knew one thing for certain: this story wasn't anywhere near its end. But neither was I. The morning of the mediation hearing arrived colder than expected, the kind of sharp Oregon chill that seeped into your coat and made you question every step you took. I stood outside the county building with a folder against my chest, breathing slowly, trying to settle the storm inside me. Today wasn't the courtroom showdown, not yet, but it was the first formal confrontation, the first time all of us would be in the same room with a neutral mediator and a table full of evidence. It felt like the beginning of the end. A car door slammed behind me. I turned to see Melissa climbing out of Dad's SUV. Her eyes looked swollen from crying mascara smudged beneath them like faint bruises. Jason followed behind, avoiding my gaze, his hands jammed deep into his coat pockets. Mom and Dad walked in silence, their usual air of authority replaced by a weary heaviness. When Mom saw me, she hesitated as if she wanted to reach out, but my glare stopped her in place. Grandpa arrived next, stepping out of my car with a firmness I hadn't seen in years. His presence alone made my parents straighten subtly like they were children again, and he was the one who decided whether they'd behaved. We walked inside without speaking. The mediation room was simple round table stack of bottled water legal pads, a white noise machine humming lightly to provide privacy. Sophia sat at the far end arranging her notes. She nodded to me as I entered. The mediator, a calm woman in her 60s with silver hair and an unreadable expression, gestured for everyone to sit. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "Today's goal is to discuss the contested ownership of the Alder Lane property and determine whether an agreement can be reached before this proceeds to a full court hearing." Her voice was steady neutral, like she'd said these exact words 1,000 times. I sat beside Sophia. Grandpa sat at my other side. Across from me sat my parents and Melissa. Dad's posture was rigid. Mom's fingers trembled. Melissa avoided my eyes entirely. The mediator folded her hands. "We will begin with the petitioner. Claire, can you briefly summarize your position?" My heart pounded, but my voice surprised me, steady, controlled, resolute. My grandfather gifted $450,000 to my parents with explicit written instructions that it was for a home to be purchased in my name. Instead, they used that money to buy a home in my sister's name, without my knowledge, without my consent, and then refinanced that property to take out additional loans. They misrepresented the purpose of the funds and misappropriated a gift that was meant for me. Melissa winced. Dad's jaw locked. Mom's chin quivered. The mediator nodded. "And your goal, I want the house transferred back to me," I said. "Or sold with full proceeds going to me as originally intended." "Thank you." The mediator turned to my parents. "Charles, Anna, your response." Dad straightened, clearing his throat. His voice was low-contained, but the strain was unmistakable. "We admit the money came from my father," he said. "We admit the house was purchased in Melissa's name. But we dispute the idea that this was theft. We believed we were doing what was best for the family. Melissa was struggling emotionally, financially. Claire had moved to Seattle, wasn't planning to stay in Oregon, and at the time we believed she didn't need the house. My blood simmered. I clenched my hands beneath the table. Dad continued. We intended to repay the money. We were trying to keep the family afloat. Sophia cut in smoothly before I could react. Intent does not negate misappropriation. Your email explicitly acknowledges the money was meant for Claire and you chose not to tell her. That alone constitutes fraudulent diversion. Dad bristled. We were trying to protect her by stealing from her, Sophia asked. Mom flinched visibly at the word. The mediator lifted a hand gently. Let's keep our tone constructive. She turned to Melissa. Melissa, would you like to share your perspective? Melissa's shoulders hunched, her fingers wringing the hem of her sleeve. I never wanted any of this, she whispered. I didn't ask for Grandpa's money. I didn't ask for the house to be about me. She glanced at me, eyes glossy. I didn't know how to tell you, Claire. I was afraid. I knew you'd hate me. And things kept getting worse. Jason's business failed. The loan spiraled. And I didn't know how to undo any of it. Her voice cracked, tears slipping down her cheeks. It was supposed to be temporary, she said softly. But then everything collapsed. And now the house is drowning in debt, and the bank is calling every day, and no matter what we do, it feels like we're already ruined. Silence filled the room. For a moment, a brief, painful moment, I felt the echo of the sister I once trusted. But it didn't erase what she'd done. The mediator looked at Sophia. Given the foreclosure status, what remedy are you proposing? Sophia slid a document across the table. Full transfer of ownership to Claire Hartman, with Claire taking control of foreclosure negotiations. Claire will assume full responsibility for settling the mortgage or arranging sale because the property was intended for her. Dad scoffed. She wants to take the property without the debt. I glared at him. You created the debt. You and Melissa, not me. Jason finally spoke, voice strained. She's right. All heads turned toward him. Jason looked exhausted but resolute. The loan was my idea. I pressured Melissa. Claire shouldn't be punished for our mistakes. Melissa jerked her head toward him, shocked. Jason, don't do this. But he kept going. I'm tired of lies. This is the truth. And Claire deserves the house. We stole it from her. Dad shot him a furious look, but Jason didn't back down. The mediator exhaled, glancing between all of us. It seems clear that responsibility for the debt lies with Melissa and her spouse, not Claire. Mom buried her face in her hands. Dad muttered, "This is unbelievable." The mediator continued, "Given the overwhelming documentation, I believe Claire's proposed remedy is reasonable. The house is transferred to her. Melissa and Jason remain financially responsible for the refinancing loan." The color drained from Melissa's face. "We can't afford that. It would destroy us." I steadied myself. My voice was softer when I spoke again. "Melissa, I'm not trying to destroy you, but I'm not sacrificing myself to save you either. I won't be erased from my own life." Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Please, Claire, please don't make us do this." I inhaled. My heart ached. My anger burned low and steady. "You made choices," I said quietly. "And choices have consequences." The mediator folded her hands. "Is the family willing to sign the agreement voluntarily? If not, this will proceed to court, and based on the evidence, the outcome will almost certainly favor Claire." Dad leaned back, eyes narrow, calculating. I recognized that look. It was the same look he used when he realized he'd lost an argument but didn't want to admit it. Mom sobbed softly beside him. Melissa whispered, "I can't lose everything." Sophia's voice cut through the tension. "If you don't sign today, foreclosure will resume and you will lose everything. But if you sign, you have time. You won't lose your home tomorrow." Jason nodded. "She's right, Mel. Sign it." Melissa looked at me, pleading one last time. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. "Because you never thought I would fight back. Because you assumed I'd sacrifice myself again. Because you believed I was strong enough to lose what was mine quietly. Out loud, I said simply, because the house was meant for me. Silence stretched. Then Melissa picked up the pen. Her hand trembled. Her signature scratched across the page. Mom signed next, tears soaking the paper. Dad hesitated, longest jaw-clenched eyes burning with resentment. But eventually he signed too angrily, carelessly, as if the ink itself offended him. Jason signed last. The mediator collected the papers, stamped them, and nodded. It's done. My heart thudded heavy and hollow, not triumphant, not joyful, something closer to grief. Grief for what the family had become. Grief for the sister I had lost long before today. Grief for the innocence that would never return. As we walked out, Melissa stopped beside me. Her voice was barely audible. Claire, I hope someday you can forgive me. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time in months. I don't know if I can, I said softly, but I hope someday you'll earn it. She nodded, tears falling again. Then she walked away, shoulders crumpled, leaning on Jason for support. Grandpa squeezed my hand gently. You did the right thing, he murmured. I nodded, though my throat burned. Outside, the sky began to clear just faintly, just enough to let in a sliver of pale sunlight. It felt like the beginning of something new, not victory, not revenge, something quieter, something steadier, the beginning of reclaiming the life I was meant to have. The day after the mediation, the house keys arrived in a plain white envelope slipped through my mail slot sometime before dawn. No note, no explanation, just the cold metallic shape of a life that was supposed to be mine from the beginning. I sat on the floor of my living room holding the keys in my palm for a long time. They were heavier than I expected, sharp edges, worn dents, faint scratches. Evidence of use. Evidence of someone else living inside a dream that had been meant for me. I didn't drive straight there. I wasn't ready. I made coffee, though I barely drank it. I showered, even though I wasn't dirty. I folded a blanket on the couch, even though no one was visiting. My body went through the motions trying to find normalcy, but nothing grounded me. Finally, around noon, I grabbed my coat and left. The drive to Alder Lane felt surreal, like I was stepping into a memory I'd never been allowed to form. The houses grew larger, yards, manicured driveways lined with sleek cars. It was the kind of neighborhood people worked decades to reach. The kind of neighborhood my sister had been gifted through deception. And now I was about to reclaim it. When I pulled up to the house, I stayed inside my car for a moment, staring at the sage green siding, the wraparound porch, the tall cedar trees whispering overhead. It felt familiar and foreign all at once, like meeting a relative for the first time. Something in me recognized it, as if I had always been meant to live here. I stepped out of the car and walked up the stone path. Each step felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. At the door, I hesitated. My reflection stared back at me through the window, hair pulled back, eyes steady, jaw set. I barely recognized the woman who had sat at her family's dinner table just a week ago. I pressed the key into the lock. It clicked. The door swung open. The smell of Melissa's perfume hit first vanilla and sandalwood, faint, but lingering. Boxes were stacked in the foyer, some open, some still taped shut. A few pieces of furniture remained: her couch, a dining chair, a lamp, but most of the house was hollowed, stripped of its life. My footsteps echoed against the hardwood floor, a house full of someone else's ghosts. The living room was smaller than I imagined, but bright, the kitchen crisp and modern, the upstairs hallway narrow but charming. The bedroom, my bedroom, had a window overlooking the yard where pine needles blanketed the ground like quiet snowfall. I walked through slowly, room by room, touching walls, brushing my hand along the banister, opening closets. Each door I opened made the house feel more mine. Not because Melissa was gone, but because her absence finally made space for me. In the master bedroom, a single object sat abandoned on the windowsill, a photo frame. My heart jolted. It was a picture of me and Melissa, maybe 10 and 14, sitting on our childhood swing set, laughing with our heads thrown back. I remembered the moment. Mom had yelled at us for ruining our new jeans. Melissa had stuck her tongue out. I had taken the blame. I lifted the frame, tracing the edge. Behind the photo was a folded sheet of notebook paper. I hesitated before sliding it out. The handwriting was unmistakable. Claire. I didn't leave this to manipulate you. I left it because I don't know how to talk to you anymore. Everything I say is wrong. Everything I feel is shame. I don't know who I am right now. I wish I could go back. I wish I could undo what I did. But all I can do is try to be better going forward. Please take care of this house. It was always yours. Melissa. My throat tightened. It didn't absolve her. It didn't erase the betrayal. But it was honest. It was human. And it hurt in a way nothing else had. I set the photo down carefully and wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. A knock startled me. I turned. Jason stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, shoulders slumped. The exhaustion on his face seemed deeper than yesterday, like he'd aged a decade overnight. "Can I come in?" he asked softly. I nodded. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. "This is surreal," he said, looking around. "Seeing you here instead of Melissa." "It's supposed to be me," I said. "It always was." He nodded. "I know." We stood in silence for a moment, both absorbing the stillness around us. "Melissa didn't want me to come," he said quietly. "But I needed to. I needed to apologize." "You already did," I replied. "Not fully." He looked at me, guilt carved into his expression. I let her make decisions I knew were wrong. I didn't stop her. I didn't stop myself. I dragged her deeper into debt. And I let all of it land on you. My arms folded instinctively. "Why didn't either of you say something before it got this far?" He swallowed hard. Shame, pride, fear, pick one, or all three. Fear of what he exhaled. Fear of disappointing your parents. Fear of losing the help they kept giving us. Fear of losing the illusion that we could fix things on our own. I almost laughed. Illusions are expensive. He nodded, eyes lowered. "Yeah, and they cost more than money." I looked at him for a long moment. "How is Melissa?" "Not good," he admitted. "She's devastated, angry, humiliated, and scared." "I'm not surprised. She knows she's to blame," he said. "But she also knows your parents pushed her into believing she deserved more than you. It's complicated. It always is." He hesitated, then asked, "Do you want a relationship with her again?" Someday, I didn't answer right away. I looked around the room at the sunlight filtering through the window at the empty spaces waiting to be filled at the home that held both betrayal and possibility. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I want peace. But forgiveness, that takes time." He nodded, accepting the answer. Before he left, he placed a small object on the kitchen counter. The house's spare key. "She told me to give this to you," he said. She said, "It feels more right coming from me." I took it. After he walked out, I stood in the emptiness of the house and listened. The quiet wasn't lonely, it was clarifying. I spent the next hours walking through every corner, opening drawers, scanning the walls for cracks or signs of damage. The house had one more secret, a notice taped inside a cabinet door. Final foreclosure notice payment, required within 14 days. Even now, even with the legal transfer underway, the house was still on the edge of collapse. My fingers curled into fists. Not again, not this time. I drove back to the bank, marched inside, and requested a meeting with the foreclosure specialist. She saw me within 10 minutes. "I need options," I said before she could speak. "All of them." She laid out 3. Full reinstatement, pay off the delinquent amount in one lump sum. Impossible. Loan modification possible but required proof of stable income and a long-term plan. Short-term hardship agreement, a temporary pause while ownership disputes resolved. "I choose option 3, I said immediately. She nodded. "I'll submit the request today." And while it processes, I said I want to apply to assume the mortgage. Her eyebrows lifted. "You want to take over the loan?" "Yes," I said, "because I'm not losing this house." We completed the paperwork. I submitted income documents, tax returns, identification. It was tedious, draining, but empowering. For the first time in my life, I was fighting for something that was mine, not out of obligation, not out of fear, but because I deserved it. When I got home, Grandpa was waiting on my porch again. I sat beside him, exhaustion settling into my bones. "Well," he asked. I handed him the bank's temporary approval notice. He smiled. "You did it." "Not yet," I said, "but I'm on my way." He nodded, resting his hand over mine. "Your grandmother would be proud." That nearly broke me. I leaned my head on his shoulder. "I hope so." "You're building your life," he said softly. "Not the one they wanted you to have, the one you want." I closed my eyes. For the first time, I truly believed him. As the sky shifted to dusk, Grandpa stood to leave. Before he did, he said, "There's something I didn't tell your parents. Or Melissa." I frowned. "What? The house money wasn't a one-time gift." He smiled gently. "I set aside more, not for a house, for your future." My breath caught. "Grandpa, you didn't." "I did," he said, "because you deserve it, and because I trust you to use it wisely." My eyes filled with tears. That night, I stood in the living room of the Alder Lane house, my house holding the keys, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The betrayal, the fight, the truth, the victory. It wasn't over yet, but I wasn't afraid anymore, because I wasn't stepping into the ruins of my sister's life. I was stepping into the beginning of mine. I spent the next week living in a strange overlap of two worlds, the quiet, healing solitude of my small rental and the hollow, echoing rooms of the Alder Lane house that still held the remnants of Melissa's life. I divided my days between meetings with the bank emails with Sophia and long hours sitting on the hardwood floors of a home I wasn't fully ready to claim. The house was legally frozen for closure, temporarily halted, and ownership transfer pending. But emotionally, everything was still shifting beneath my feet. Every time I stepped inside Alder Lane, I felt the weight of what had been done and the weight of what I had reclaimed. On the fourth morning, I arrived with a notebook and my laptop ready to start sorting through practical decisions, renovations, repairs, what furniture to keep, what memories to remove. But when I opened the door, I heard a faint noise upstairs. My pulse spiked. I froze at the base of the staircase, listening. A soft creak. Then another. Someone was in the house. I grabbed the closest object I could find, a broom leaning by the door, and climbed the stairs slowly, step by cautious step. My breath caught as I reached the landing. The noise was coming from the master bedroom. When I pushed the door open, Melissa jumped back with a gasp. She stood near the closet, eyes wide, hands shaking. A half-packed cardboard box sat on the floor beside her. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. My fingers loosened around the broom, but I didn't lower it completely. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed hard. I came to get the rest of my things. I thought you were at work. You should have called. I didn't think you'd answer." She wasn't wrong. Still seeing her here without warning sent a wave of confusion and anger through me. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said quickly, raising her hands as if surrendering. "I just wanted to take my things and go before you started moving in." "I haven't even decided if I'm moving in," I said. That made her pause. She looked genuinely surprised. "You're not—" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "Everything still feels raw." Silence hung between us for a moment. Melissa nodded slowly and knelt to keep packing. She handled each item with care, as if afraid to disturb the air between us. I watched her quietly. She looked smaller than I remembered, fragile, in a way that made resentment and pity collide inside my chest. Her sweater swallowed her frame, her hair was pulled into a messy bun, her fingers trembled as she folded a shirt into the box. She wasn't the villain I'd built up in my mind. She was broken. But broken people could still break others. So she whispered, "You talked to Jason, yes. And he told you everything, yes." She rubbed her forehead. "I didn't want him to, but he said he owed you the truth." "He did," I said, "and so did you." She let out a shaky breath. "I know." I leaned against the door frame. "Why didn't you?" She sat back on her heels, tears pooling in her eyes. Because I didn't know how to be the bad guy, and every version of the truth made me the bad guy. You were the bad guy, I said quietly. But you could have still told me. She nodded, wiping her cheek. I know that now. But every day I didn't tell you made it harder to ever tell you, and before I knew it, a year had passed. And then another lie, and another, and the house became this thing I couldn't let go of without admitting I'd stolen it. You did steal it. She nodded miserably. I folded my arms, exhaling slowly. Why did you think you deserved it more than me? She looked up sharply, panic flashing in her eyes. I didn't. I swear I didn't. I was drowning Claire. I was losing Jason. We had bills stacked to the ceiling. He couldn't find work. I couldn't get hours at the school. We were melting, and Mom kept saying you were strong, that you'd bounce back, that you didn't need help. My stomach twisted. Mom said that Melissa nodded. She said Grandpa's money would overwhelm you, that you'd feel indebted or guilty. She said it would be cruel to give it to you during the divorce. That was news to me. And then Melissa continued. She said something else. She said you weren't planning to stay in Oregon, that you had a new job, new plans, new life. So giving the house to you would be pointless. My jaw tightened. So she convinced you? No, Melissa whispered. I convinced myself. Because it made everything easier to justify. I stared at her, the truth settling like dust. So that's it, I said softly. You took the house because you were drowning. Mom endorsed it because she thought I didn't need it. Dad agreed because he didn't question Mom. And nobody cared that I was drowning too. Her cry cracked the air. I cared. But you never show when you're hurting Claire. You don't let anyone see you break. You handle everything alone. I thought you'd be fine. I wasn't, I said, voice trembling. But no one ever asked. Tears streamed freely down her cheeks now. She covered her face with her hands. I'm sorry, she whispered again. I know it doesn't fix anything. I know sorry isn't enough. But it's all I have. I sat on the edge of the bed, letting the silence expand. I was still angry, still hurt, still betrayed. But some part of me, small and reluctant, felt the ache of her words. You know what hurts the most, I finally said. It wasn't the house. Or the money. It was the fact that everyone assumed I didn't matter. Her head lifted slowly, eyes red. You matter. You always mattered. We were just blind. I swallowed hard. That blindness cost me everything. She nodded. I know. We sat there for a long moment, no shouting, no accusations, just two sisters in a room full of ghosts. Then she stood, closing the last box. I'm leaving, she whispered. Jason's already packed the car. We're moving into a small apartment near his work, starting over. She paused, voice breaking. I don't expect forgiveness. Not now. Maybe not ever. But I hope someday you'll remember that I loved you, even when I was horrible at showing it. I didn't answer. She walked toward the door, gripping the box, tears slipping down her cheeks. Before she left, she paused again. Claire. I looked up. If you ever want me back in your life, even just a little, I'll be here, trying to earn it. She left quietly, her footsteps fading down the stairs. When the door closed behind her, the house fell completely silent. I sat there alone, feeling the weight of her absence and the jagged edges of what remained. Later that afternoon, Mom called. I let it go to voicemail, so she drove to my rental and waited on the porch until I returned. Claire, she said, standing quickly, please, talk to me. I crossed my arms. Why should I? She winced. Because I'm your mother. Then why didn't you act like one? Her eyes filled instantly. I did what I thought was best, for who I asked, me or Melissa. She looked away. That's what I thought. She stepped closer. I made a mistake. I see that now. I let fear guide me, fear of what I demanded. She swallowed. Fear of losing Melissa, fear of watching her life collapse, fear of hurting the child who couldn't handle hurt. And you assumed I could. Yes, she whispered, because you've always handled everything. I shook my head. I'm not invincible, Mom. I never was. I just didn't have the luxury of falling apart. No one ever picked me up when I did. Tears streaked down her face. I'm so sorry. I didn't respond. She took a shaky breath. Your father? He won't say it, but he's ashamed. He knows he failed you. We both do. Her voice softened, breaking like thin glass. We want to make it right. You can't erase what happened. No, she said. But we can learn from it. And we can change. If you let us. My throat tightened. She reached for my hand but stopped halfway, waiting for permission. I let her take it. I love you, she whispered. Please don't shut us out forever. I'm not shutting you out, I said quietly. But I'm setting boundaries. For the first time in decades. She nodded. We'll respect them. I hope so. When she left, I sat in the quiet again this time, not weighed down by anger, but by something unexpected, possibility. The family I had known was gone. But maybe slowly, carefully, a better one could take shape. That night I drove back to Alder Lane, turned on every light, and stood in the center of the living room. The house didn't feel like a crime scene anymore. It felt like a blank canvas. Mine to rebuild. Mine to reclaim. Mine to redefine. And for the first time since Grandpa asked that question at the dinner table, why don't you live in the house I bought for you, I finally knew the answer. Because it wasn't mine yet. But now it was. And I was ready to step into it fully. Spring arrived in Oregon with a softness I hadn't felt in years, the kind of gentle warmth that seeped into the skin and made everything feel newly possible. The renovation on Alder Lane wrapped at the end of March, and for the first time since the house became part of my life before I even knew it existed, I unlocked the front door with a feeling that could only be described as ownership. Not just legal ownership, not just practical ownership, but emotional ownership. The house finally felt like mine, shaped by my choices, my work, and the truth I fought to uncover. The fresh paint smell was almost gone, replaced by the scent of new hardwood polish and sunlight warming the floors. I walked through every room, slowly letting my fingers run along the smooth banisters, the cool countertops, the carefully chosen fixtures. Every corner held a memory, now some painful, some healing, but all mine. I ended in the living room, the heart of the house. The space that had once echoed with silence and secrets now held cozy furniture, soft light shelves filled with books I'd collected through every chapter of my life. It felt like a place where beginnings could happen. Maybe even forgiveness. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I almost didn't look, assuming it was another renovation invoice, but when I picked it up, I froze. Melissa. A simple text. I heard you moved in today. I'm truly happy for you. If you ever want company, even just for coffee on the porch, I'm here. No pressure, just love. I sat down on the couch, breathing slowly. Her message didn't sting the way her words used to, and it didn't feel manipulative or needy. It felt earnest, quiet. A small offering from someone who finally understood the weight of her choices. I typed back after a long moment. Thank you. I'm learning to love it here. One day maybe we can try coffee. I'll let you know. Minutes later, 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then returned. Finally, she responded. That's more than I hoped for. I'm grateful. I set the phone down gently and leaned back, letting the house settle around me like a warm blanket. For the first time since all this started, I didn't feel pulled in two directions, anger tugging one way, empathy the other. Everything felt balanced. I wasn't finished forgiving. Maybe I never would be. But I wasn't carrying bitterness like a shield anymore either. Something had shifted. Later that evening, Grandpa Everett came by for the first time since the renovations finished. He insisted on walking up the steps without help, even though his cane thumped against each stair. Worth every dollar, he said as he stepped inside, his eyes scanning the entryway. Looks like a real home. It is, I said quietly. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his grip warm and steady despite his age. You earned this, Claire, not because of the money. Money is easy. You earned it because you fought for yourself. You didn't let lies win. I swallowed a lump in my throat. I didn't win alone. No, he agreed, but you chose the higher road. That's what matters. He moved into the living room, taking in every detail, nodding with approval. Then he lowered himself into the armchair I'd picked specifically for him, a soft leather recliner that matched the room and supported his back. You didn't have to buy that, he said, touching the armrest. I wanted you to have a place here, I replied. A real place. His smile deepened the wrinkles around his eyes. Then I suppose I'll visit more often. He stayed for nearly an hour telling stories from his youth, reminiscing about the early days of his company, laughing at memories of Dad and Uncle Roy getting into childish competitions that somehow involved heavy machinery. And I listened not out of politeness, but because I wanted to, because the sound of his voice in my home felt right. Before he left, he pulled me into a hug that lingered longer than usual. You rebuilt more than a house, he whispered. You rebuilt trust, and that's the hardest thing in the world. When the door closed behind him, I stood for a long moment in the quiet. A peaceful quiet. The kind that didn't hide anything. 2 days later, Dad and Mom came by with a housewarming gift. A modest ceramic vase filled with daffodils, bright yellow, freshly picked. Mom held it out like an offering, an apology shaped into petals. We didn't want to overwhelm you, she said softly, but we wanted to bring something. I took the vase gently. Thank you. They're beautiful. Mom's shoulders loosened a breath, leaving her as if she'd been holding it for months. Dad gave a small nod, respectful and cautious. It struck me then they were trying. Not perfectly, not quickly, but sincerely. We had tea at the dining table, and for the first time in years, the conversation wasn't tense. There were pauses, yes, gaps, where hurt used to live, but they didn't feel sharp anymore. At one point, Dad cleared his throat. We know we can't undo what happened, he said, but we want to be here now. If you'll let us. I will, I replied, but this time on my terms. Of course, Mom said quickly, always. They left early, promising to give me space. As I watched their car drive away, I felt something unexpected hope. Not naive hope, just the quiet possibility of a healthier relationship, step by slow step. That weekend, I hosted a small dinner in the newly finished kitchen. Nothing extravagant, just me, Grandpa, and 2 neighbors who helped me carry furniture when the movers got stuck behind a jackknife truck on Highway 26. The night was warm, filled with laughter, and more comfortable than anything I had felt in years. But the most surprising moment came later. I was washing dishes when I heard a soft knock. I wiped my hands, opened the door, and found Melissa standing on the porch. She didn't step inside. She didn't assume she was welcome. She just smiled weakly. I saw your lights on, she said. I was driving by. I just wanted to see the house finished. I nodded. Do you want to come in? Her eyes widened, filling instantly. Only if you mean that. I do, I said. She stepped inside slowly, as if afraid the floor might reject her. She looked at the kitchen, the living room, the warm lamps glowing in their corners. It looks like you, she whispered. I'm glad. We sat on the couch. She didn't try to fill the silence. She didn't make excuses. She didn't rehash the past. She simply said, "Thank you for letting me in." "Thank you for asking," I replied. She stayed only 20 minutes, leaving before the quiet turned heavy. But when she walked out, she hugged me for the first time in years. A real hug. A human one. A hopeful one. After she left, I stood in the doorway for a long moment, letting the cool night air wash over me. Everything had changed, but not all change was loss. Some of it was rebirth. Some of it was reclamation. And some of it, slow, tender, hesitant, was forgiveness. The next morning, for the first time since everything began, I woke up feeling whole. I walked through my house, making coffee, opening windows, letting sunlight pour in. The future didn't feel sharp or unpredictable anymore. It felt open, spacious, mine. This house wasn't just a place to live. It was a promise I intended to keep to myself, to Grandpa, to the woman I was becoming, and maybe eventually to the family learning to become better versions of themselves. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of resilience, justice, and family transformation, make sure to like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to bring you more stories that touch the heart and stir the soul.